It is late January. That means we need to get some more pruning done. That's up next. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne with Edge of Nowhere Farm, and we're coming to you here today. It's actually late morning, January 23rd, 2021. So we're here doing a series on pruning our trees here for the first time. Today what we're going to be focusing on is pome fruit. So pome fruit basically is apples and pears for us here on this farm. And what you see behind me here would be our eastern orchard where we keep all of our pome fruit. So we have two different types of trees that we're going to be pruning today. The first one is the one you see behind me here. These are newly planted trees that have only been in the ground for about 3 months. They were potted trees that we got from RSI growers, and they are apple trees. So these apple trees are Golden Dorset and Anna apple trees. These have a tendency to grow very aggressively for us once we get into the growing season, but they haven't seen much in the way of growth because we planted them in late October. So the first thing we're going to be doing is pruning these guys into whips. Because they're so young and we need to establish a trunk, we're going to basically get it so that we have a single branch that's going to eventually become the trunk of the tree and train that up a single stake. So before we get to pruning, let's talk a little bit about the supplies we're going to need today. So for this first set of trees, these apple trees, because they're so small, the only thing we're really going to need would be a good set of pruners and maybe a lopper, although I think the pruners are probably cut it just fine. The eye protection, I always use these whenever I'm dealing with sticks or branches. There's not much to these little guys, but anytime you get a stick or a branch whipping around, real easy to get hit in the eye, so we will have that. I will be using gloves because we have sharp objects and I do sharpen my pruners. I want to make sure I'm not cutting it myself as opposed to pruning these trees. We need to go through all of these trees and pull the wood chips back, because we're going to also be making sure that we have our root crown basically exposed or just under the surface of the ground here. And then we will be swapping out these cages to larger cages. So before we get to that, let's go ahead and get these wood chips out of the way so we can actually take a look at this tree. Wanted to take a quick break while we're getting all these wood chips back and show you the advantage, especially here in Arizona, the advantages to heavy mulch. Actually, the biggest advantage would be this right here. That would be a nice looking worm. So we've already got worm activity here in this bed. Got another one right here. So I'm gonna keep them nice and happy underneath the chips. So that's really encouraging to see. In addition, we planted these trees in October, I had mentioned that, and one of the things that we talk about regularly here is the importance of doing your irrigation away from the tree to encourage that root growth out. Remember, we've got that hard caliche in most areas here, so you want to plant your trees high and you want to encourage root growth out because they're not going to be able to put roots down real easy. And it might be hard to make out, but I've got feeder roots right here. You can see going out into the watering ring that was right here. I've got them on this side as well. Several different feeder roots coming out here, right there. Very encouraging to see. So that's all really good. Just wanted to take that quick break as we pulled this first set of wood chips back. Really encouraging to see that. This is the first tree that we're gonna do. So this one here, there's not much here for me to prune actually. Now we are going to come back through and paint this a little higher. I do have to test this. We've got our new cage here. So I need to make sure that I'm making all of my pruning cuts at least up to the top of the cage. I think with all of these trees, for the most part, just a little bit of branching here in the middle and some down on the bottom. But I do need to go ahead and take off my old tape. I've got one branch here. I am gonna go ahead and take that off. I only want just a single trunk at this point that I'm gonna be able to basically tape to this stake once we have this painted. And really that's it for this one. Let's move to the next. This one, obviously we have more branching. Now as far as the height, I already know based on my cage that this is not gonna be high enough up. One thing I wanna point out is down here on the bottom, as far as roots, this is your chance when you pull your wood chips back to check rooting. You can see I've got rooting coming out right here, and I can already see that my root crown is here. In fact, you'll see this is packed down. I had actually put some dirt here because underneath the wood chips I had my root crown essentially exposed. So Now, I'm not too concerned about that because I have a tremendous amount of root growth that's coming here into the ring. But again, now that we're here during pruning season, we're gonna pull the wood chips back and make sure that our crowns are basically either exposed or just underneath. So as far as pruning, I'm gonna take everything off, being careful not to hit the trunk. So I already know that this is not going to be tall enough for me at this point. I'm still going to need it taller than this. And as far as my stake, I probably will need a taller stake. So I'll swap the stake out once we get this whole trunk painted. Another tree here, pretty straightforward. The only thing that's a little confusing would be kind of where I'm going to end up at the top. And I already know I'm going to lose all of these branches at the bottom. We've talked about this before when it comes to pruning, but there is a collar on each one of these branches. It might be hard to make out, but the collar is basically right there. You can see where it ends. So I want to make my cut just past it, just like that. That'll heal over real nice. As I come up to the top, I've got a few different options here. So I have what looks like the trunk continuing here, but I have some nice strong growth out of this particular branch. I'm gonna go ahead and save that branch. So that will become our trunk. I'm gonna save this branch here because it's tallest, just like that. Now I can stake that up, just like that, so it can continue to grow up and it'll give me that nice straight trunk. Last but not least is this little tree here. Now, one of the challenges that I'm seeing right away here, you can see I have my root crown. I've got a lot of feeder roots here. So actually what I'm gonna probably do is bring a little bit of soil into here and actually pile it up here. I don't wanna have all those roots exposed. And as far as pruning cuts, I only need to make one pruning cut. It's this here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get some soil on here, and then I think for the most part, we're actually done with the apple trees. Once we get that paint on there, we'll get the cages on here, get our wood chips back on. Now I will definitely pile wood chips up on top of this. I have obviously a lot of root growth coming out here, but I still have a lot of activity here in the center of this tree, and I want to make sure I'm protecting these young roots that are just here on the surface. That'll give you an idea of what these brand new apple trees are going to look like. Really looking forward to nice straight trunks on these. One of the things that we're challenged with sometimes when we get these little potted, newly grafted trees is getting a nice straight trunk. And then of course the challenge we have with our rabbits and jackrabbits is we need a much taller trunk than we typically would want. You can see we're going to be able to take care of that on all these new trees. Now, assuming that we don't get rained on too much, we still have some more pruning to do because we have pear trees. So that would kind of be the second pome fruit that we need to go ahead and get pruned. And those are going to take a little bit more detail. Next up for us today with our pome fruit pruning would be our pear trees. You can see these have gone fully dormant. For the most part, they did that on their own. And we've gotten some pretty good growth. In fact, as Lori pans around, you'll see we got a mixture of some slightly smaller trees and some that are a little bit taller. So with these trees, these are actually almost a year old. So they've been in the ground just shy of a year. We put them in, I believe it was the end of March or so. We have mainly Asian pears here, but we also have a couple of pears that are more of your traditional pears. So I think we have the Waddell pear from Reed at Our Side Growers. Actually, all of these were done by him, but that's kind of his pear. And then we also have a Seckle pear, and then we got a couple different types of Asian pears here as well. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and get these small cages removed, get the wood chips pulled back, so we can take a look at how we're gonna go about pruning these trees. So we have found that with all of the fall fruiting apple and pear trees, that we have an issue with the actual fruit getting into the ripening stage, so getting into the fall. So what we're trying to do now, as opposed to an open center, which we've always done with all of our pome fruit, especially with these fall varieties, we want to do more of a central leader and then have scaffolding that comes off the central leader so we can grow a more dense canopy and hopefully actually protect the fruit from the sun and potentially from birds as well, although mainly from the sun, because in the middle of summer we get dieback on the fruit, dieback on the tree, and what we're trying to do is protect that fruit from that sun. So we figure having a central leader with scaffolding, more of a traditional look to these trees, will actually be better off. So what I'm gonna be doing is something very similar to what you saw me do with the apple trees, and that's establish a central leader. So these trees are a little bit older. I can see with this one, as for an example, I've got basically a double scaffold. And I also know that I need to make sure that I've got these trees at least 3 feet tall before I have any branching that comes out. So I already know, just looking at this tree, I'm gonna have to lose all of these branches and then basically wind up with just this central leader. So I'm gonna go ahead, get my loppers and get to work on this first tree. I think that one's good. Now we are gonna leave this in. I'm actually gonna use it to kind of essentially stake this and keep it so that it's more vertical and allow this tree to get a nice, well, straight-ish trunk. Let's go and take a look at the next one. This here you can see, much the same as that last one. I have some branching down here I need to take care of, and then I've got a nice central leader right there. This is one of our Waddell pears. So I can see already I've got the central leader that I'm gonna pick out here. This is the most, it's a vertical, nice vertical branch, and also it's the tallest, but nice and thick. So I'm gonna wind up losing this one right here at the Y, and then of course all the growth down here. Could definitely see how these trees really wanna grow vertical. They're not gonna wanna put that horizontal scaffolding out. So this is gonna definitely take some training once we get a little further along with these trees. So as I'm looking at this branch, probably could be trained to actually come down just a little bit. And I think as far as height, I think I may actually be above my 3-foot level. I'm gonna test it with one of our cages, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and just leave this one here. I've already taken off plenty of material from this tree anyway, so let's see if we can get that one to stay. This tree has already done a really good job of starting to put out some horizontal branching. I think I am still gonna lose probably at least this first one here, maybe another 1 or 2. Again, you can see how vertical this is wanting to grow. So as we save these, we'll probably need to come back and start to train these to come out just a bit. But I know I'm gonna lose this bottom one here, and then we'll kind of take a second peek at this one. So before I finish this one up, I've got 2 branches here that are both going the same direction, but as I test my cage, if my cage comes to here, and it's pretty close, I think it's gonna need to be up here, because I think we're gonna need to actually let it break up here. So I'll probably wind up losing this in this branch, but overall, this tree definitely could stay just the way it is. We're just challenged with those rabbits. So I'm gonna come back to this once I can test it as far as height with our cage. This tree and this tree are both Seckle pears. Again, you can see these are gonna be growing very, very vertical. I've got a couple of things if Lori slides around this way. This right here is actually the graft point. So you can see that's rootstock right there. And you have a sucker essentially right here. I'm gonna definitely take that off, not interested in that. But you can see we've got our graft point here. I'm gonna go ahead and take this piece off here. We don't need that anymore, we'll paint over that. And then as far as the tree, I already know that I'm probably gonna want this to break right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and take these bottom branches off. I think I'm gonna be okay here. I think I'm just gonna leave these branches for now, but this guy here is going a little sideways. I'm gonna take that off. I've got another branch in here that's going the same direction as these. I'm gonna take that off as well. Another small one here that's going too vertical to the trunk. So you can see here how this small little nub of a branch is going right along the trunk. I don't want that, so I'm gonna take that off carefully. The only other issue that I have here, so obviously I have my central leader here. I have a nice branch here, but I also have a couple of them here. I have one that's coming out that's headed to the west. I have another one here that I've got that I can have head out to the east. So if I train these down, I'm actually gonna be okay. I can train these down and then train this one out this way, and essentially I've got the beginning of my scaffolding for this tree. So I'm gonna go ahead and just leave those there, and then we'll come back and figure these out probably come spring. We got our last tree here. This is another Seckle pear. I've got some really good scaffolding that's actually starting to occur right up here. Pretty confident this is gonna be high enough up for me. So all I'm gonna do is just take out these branches. Now, if Lori slides around this way, you'll see just how evenly spaced the scaffolding is. I've got scaffolding heading to the south, scaffolding heading out here to the east. I've got scaffolding to the west. So now I've got a separate one here that's going the same direction. I'm gonna go ahead and lose that one. These are too close together and I want it to be a little bit higher. Again, hopefully that cage, when we test it out, this will be tall enough. Now I've got one to the south again, one to the east, one to the west here, and I've got this little guy who normally I would probably take off, but he's actually heading out here to the north. So I'm gonna leave all those just like that. Go ahead and take these off, but what I also wanted to show you is how this branch is bent. So when you're deciding where you want to make pruning cuts, even if this was a good branch otherwise, we don't want to have a branch that goes this way across the trunk. This will continue to get larger and press up against the trunk, and you could potentially have issues right in here with bacteria, mold, and fungus actually being trapped between these two. So this is coming off one way or another, so that goes away. And then of course, we don't need these here. That I think is gonna be it for this tree as well. That's gonna wrap it for our pome fruit pruning for 2021. So you can see what the pear trees look like behind us here. It'll be interesting to see how these do on a central leader design. We haven't done that with pome fruit before. In fact, really none of our trees shy of citrus trees, technically. So it'll be interesting to see how we can keep these trees and whether by pruning them this way, we can actually get some ripe pome fruit into the fall. So just want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section down below. In our Amazon shop, I'll leave a link down in the description. That's a free, painless way to help support the channel. If you start with that link, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help to support us here. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere, so can you.
You think you need the saw?
No. I guess I only really need to have these. I'll need the saw for the figs, but we may not get to figs today. Okay.
Let me get my saw out.
Let me get my saw. My sawzall. You can see some are quite a bit taller. So this one's probably about 6 feet tall or so. What are you looking at?
Nothing.
Oh, you're looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Well, because I was looking to see if it was as tall as you, and it's...
Yeah, almost, okay. So you can see some of them are quite a bit taller, not quite 6 foot here. But since you pointed that out so well, thank you. Exaggerating. It's about 8 feet tall. There we go. So we have found that with all of our fall flute.
What's a flute?
I don't know. A flute is the thing that you play, you know. Doo-doo-doo.